the campus of the University of Pennsylvania Wharton School, this is Marketing Matters on Business Radio.
Hello and welcome. You're listening to Marketing Matters here on Business Radio, SiriusXM 132. I'm Barbara Kahn, the Patty and J.H. Baker Professor of Marketing. And today we are live in the studio with our Spotlight segment. I'm thrilled to welcome Stuart Weitzman. Stuart is the founder and chairman emeritus of Stuart Weitzman Shoe Company, and that footwear is sold in more than 75 countries and worn by numerous celebrities around the world. Stuart sold the company to Coach in 2015, but he stayed on as shoe designer. He graduated, this is the most important fact about Stuart, he graduated from the Wharton School, and he was later honored by having the Design and Architecture School named after him. It is known as the Stuart Weitzman School of Design. And now, in his free time, Stuart aids a number of philanthropic causes, and he mentors students who have entrepreneurial aspirations at the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School. But he also goes around the country, and he's been giving talks at many universities. And we're really happy to have him here back at Wharton. Stuart, thank you so much for joining us in the studio today.
Well, you know I love being here. This is where my touring lecture circuit began.
Yeah, we could talk about that. Like, as I recall, what year was it? Do you remember?
It was 8 years ago.
It was 8, and you were still, you hadn't retired yet,
No,
right?
I was running the company still, but, you know, my daughter gave me good advice. Daddy, figure out how to fill up these 15-hour days when you finally sell this business. And I started with you.
Yeah. So I'll just recount, and then we'll talk about what's happened since. But you came into I think it was my consumer behavior course, and I told my students in advance that you were coming, and anybody who had your shoes should wear them. And we did have many, many people in the audience who were wearing your shoes and very proud. We had it was an undergraduate class, as I recall, and I had several fashionistas who really knew design, they really knew your product, and they were very proud to wear your shoes. And they came into the class, and you told stories about your career, which was very unusual at the time, and I was happy that you came to do that because you were unusual in the sense, and you emphasize this when you talk to our students, that you were a business person trained by Wharton, so you really knew business, but you were also a design person, and those two functions were unusual in the world of luxury, in the world of fashion design, to have both of them in one head and operating the company. And you told the students at the time of many strategic decisions you made that really were milestones in your company. So just because not everybody was in that class, you want to talk a little bit about what you said then, and then we'll take it what you're doing now.
Well, it was my first talk. You summarized it pretty well, except you didn't point out that I signed 13 pair of shoes that day. Ran out of ink in that silver tip pen. And the impression I was trying to make with these students is that they are going to struggle a little to figure out what they really want to do in life. But that struggle is worth it. I told them, I hope it makes your heart sing wherever you end up. We say passion, do your passion, but it's, you know, even more than that. And a lot of them paid attention. I talked about the business side, because as CEO, I had to run the business. They were certainly even more interested in the creative side and how we were going to build a brand in the fashion world. I made such a clear point that regardless of what you think is valuable in the look of your product or your service, it has to work. You have to keep your promise. Everyone's a salesperson, so even if we're not selling a product, we're selling ourselves. And you're telling people, this is what I do, who I am, what I make. If you don't keep that promise when you deliver, you're going to have to find another career. And that was the most important point that I think I got out of Wharton, quite honestly, because one of my professors who had been an entrepreneur, I think his name was Longstreet, he made that point. Well, we know about the football coach who said you can't fool everybody all the time, right? And you just can't. So keep your promise. Find your niche. Make sure you live up to it, and you'll enjoy and be successful in whatever you do.
You know, that's a very interesting thing, especially for somebody as successful as you are, coming back to the students and telling them, have values, live by your values, live by your ethics, things like that. You know, don't cut corners on that. Don't cut corners on those kinds of things. It'll come back to haunt you. I think the students did 100% respect that message that you made. I can also tell you, and this is from the hindsight, I didn't prepare this, so it's just salient what I remember from that talk. Some of the points you made that stayed with me. One of them, which I thought was pretty interesting, was that you opened a factory in Spain, and at the time, a lot of shoes were being made in Italy.
That's
and you
correct.
talked a lot about that decision, and I think you were making the point, which came across, that it was one of your smarter decisions. You made a lot of smart decisions, but that was a particularly smart decision. And can you go back and refresh why that was such an important strategic decision?
Well, being 40 years ago, I really haven't thought about why I did it any time recently. But it was a risk I took because I was not going to a country where I could show off prestige. Italy would have given me that. But I saw opportunities there in many ways. Less competition for workers. Very, very few high-grade manufacturers to compete with. And the sourcing of your product is as important as what you end up creating. So that was a key risk I took, and it paid off. I also saw a real discipline in that society. It's still there. And I guess it was founded because they lived 30, 40 years under Franco, and it was a disciplined society. He made sure that those who weren't were no longer around. And when he finally died and the king encouraged Parliament to move into the European community, that same discipline existed. We had no strikes in 46 years, not one strike in any of our factories. We always reached the right conclusions. Maybe that's why, but also they didn't see a confrontation between owner and worker. We worked together. Paid off years to come. The key to the city that we were in, Alicante, given to me, not voted on by the administration, but by the workers in the town I was in. You know, if you take a risk and the reward is greater than the possible cost, I encourage people to do it, because it worked for me in that regard. And that's why I went to Spain.
And I think it gave you a differentiation for your product and advantages, you know, that you could translate. So I personally remember that as a very interesting decision because, like you said, most of the products were being made in Italy at that time. The other decision, and I don't know if this was a decision or just a commitment to your values, but another thing that I own many of your shoes, so I know this is true.
Thank you.
Is that they're comfortable. They're not only beautiful, but they're functional. And I cannot say that about all of my other pairs of shoes. So I think you also emphasize that as part of the product you were delivering.
Yeah, Spain kind of allowed that for me in this regard. We were a big shot in a small world. In Italy, we would have been a little shot in a big world. So being the big shot, we were able to make our rules. Everyone would live by them. They would naturally accept them. And one of them was that the discipline in the quality of the product, we could not change it. We couldn't ever compromise it. And from the very beginning, I kind of realized, this is the business side, that I don't want to put shoes on you, give you a blister. You're going to tell your friend, who's going to tell her friend, and we probably lost 8 customers, not just you. And it cost me, once we did the analysis, with all the marketing costs of a season, how many new customers did we get? $8,000 for every one. You think I want to throw that away? That was the business side. So, and by the way, it often was in conflict with the creative side. I have discarded many gorgeous shoes, really gorgeous shoes, that I knew gals would love because my partner, who made sure every shoe worked right before we distributed it, said, this is hurting the foot here. As pretty as that line is, it's cutting me in the wrong spot. You can't put this in the marketplace. So by playing off both of them and having that discipline in our factory, Spain worked out. That's why the DNA of Stuart Weitzman became fashion and function, not just one and not just the other.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I remember you talked about that. It was an actual person that you worked with who wore your shoes, right?
She will actually be with me at the talk tonight.
That was pretty interesting. And of course, the thing that was most fun, and I'm sure you still talk about, was all your promotion ideas to support the brand.
I love marketing.
Yeah, right. And
that's why I sought you out, because of your career.
Yeah, I mean, what was most, I remember, and I'm sure this is one of many, many stories. I don't want to steal the thunder from telling it in the wrong way, but I remember you're talking about the Oscars, obviously, and you were saying everybody's focusing on the dresses, but what shoes are they wearing? And ever since you told us that story, I look at the pictures now, and they do start talking about the shoes, which they didn't before you had this big eureka moment, right? This was a big opportunity for you.
I am proud to take credit for the shoe cam. We exercised some originality one year, and it was so well received that shoe cams were on most red carpets from then on out. And Joan Rivers helped a lot too. She just carried on about how the shoes fit, and I'm on the red carpet. I'm going to wear your shoes the entire night, Stuart. It's unbelievable. I'm so happy. Please don't retire. With her big, wonderful mouth, as we know.
I mean, it's just so interesting that people just accept status quo, that you're going to focus on the celebrity, you're going to focus on the dress, and it's such a natural to focus on the shoes. But before you had that idea, it just wasn't being done.
No.
And then having that creative idea gives you such an advantage going forward.
Well, it did, because Italians they have great hands. They have a terrific eye. They can put a line to a shoe that's incomparable, honestly, but they don't pay attention to how it feels. They care about how it looks, and there are some great brands that have lived off of that, and I admire them. If you could have a huge market and actually acknowledge that my goal is not to make your foot feel good, my goal is to make your foot look good, I admire someone who's able to do that. It is not my DNA, and it's not one of the values of our brand, which is another very important thing I think I instituted in our company. We never had rules for our brand. It was always values. And that allowed us to evolve as the values of society changed. I think if I were restricted to certain rules, you can't veer from them, might have been a handicap, but it wasn't in our case.
You sound ahead of the curve there. Like, you're saying things that I think we're talking about in modern branding now, this idea of values. And you had your values back then. Instead of being either product-driven or customer-driven, you were always value-driven, is kind of what you're telling me. The other thing I think you were ahead of the curve on, and this is some of the other things that happened, I think, around the Oscars, or I can't remember exactly where, but you did buzzworthy ideas. Like, you had ideas that generated a lot. It wasn't just the shoe cam, which to me was a very big inspiration, but I can't remember, they were like diamond encrusted boots or something. I mean, didn't you have something like that got a lot of attention before all the social media strategies that are now the way people are doing? I think you were doing that in.
Well, all these talks have led me to have to come up with some titles for the different ones I give. And the one that's most often part of my touring is an entrepreneurial's journey on the road less traveled. And I emphasize the road less traveled. Thank you, Robert Frost, for that wonderful poem. It became my mantra. And I recognized in life, even before my career, that when you do something that gets you to the finish line, but in an unusual way, a roundabout way, not that straight line and predictable path, you get noticed, it's more fun, your team loves doing it, and the end result is multiplied. So all of these things that you just referenced about doing things that hadn't been done before to get us noticed, that became part of the company in absolutely every decision I made, even how to finance the business. That's how pervasive this idea was.
So give us some examples, because they're so much fun.
Well, eventually I had to advertise. You can't live off of all the celebrities wearing your shoes and getting the credits for it. That's a brand building thing. But we're in business. So I decided that I had to advertise. But I was also, this is again the business side coming into play. I was so aware in 4 years in business, I'm not making them as beautiful as others. Blahnik had been around 20 years before me, and Prada, etc. I don't have the money to hire the celebrities or the actresses that are going to model them that they can, so mine go faceless, so to speak, while theirs are so recognizable. And maybe even the quality of shoemaking. It's a craft, honestly, Barbara. It takes years to make it better and better and better. And I will tell you, in the last year I made shoes, they were better than in the next to the last year I made shoes. That's what happens with a craft. I could sum it up with 4 words. Everyone says I'm a little obsessed with shoes. I think I'm a lot obsessed with shoes, but they're being polite. And our first ad said, Stuart's dog. There's a picture of this beautiful Dalmatian. We whited out the spots and we stenciled on shoes.
Oh, that's so cute.
And more than cute, Barbara, it won us the Clio Award for print advertising. I am still a nobody in footwear. I mean, I'm up. You know who I'm up against. And Stuart Weitzman wins the ad campaign with our little obsessed with shoes Dalmatian. So that convinced me. I always have to think out of the shoebox, if pardon the pun. But that little campaign was phenomenal. You know what happened? We got 8,000 posters, requests from mothers. My daughter has a dog. It didn't have to be a dog. Oh, it'd be so cute. Could you send me a poster? So we weren't making posters, but you can be sure we made posters. Sent out over 8,000 of them. Now, I remember someone in the company saying, you really want to do that? These kids are 10 years old. They're not customers. But what are they going to be in 12 years? When they get married even? What brand will they know before any other with that poster on the wall while they're growing up?
And of course, that's modern marketing, lifetime value of the customer. You see all of that kind of stuff going now.
It was ahead of the game, I think.
You were definitely
But I
ahead
didn't
of
think
the
of
game.
it that way, Barbara. It just seemed like something to do that others didn't. Because, as I said, am I going to hire a model as famous as them? No, I can't. I had to think out of the box.
Didn't you also, I can't remember the details of this, but didn't you also design an architect to help design your stores?
Oh, boy, was that. You talk about you can't do it alone. We're now successful, and we're as good in America and Canada and a little bit in Europe as anybody. But we're not in Asia. The global market is beginning to open. And just as I remember when I got into our shoes in Bergdorf Goodman, 100 boutiques around America wanted to buy Stuart Weitzman. They shop the best stores, see who's being bought, and they try to chase down those brands. There has to be a store in Asia or Hong Kong or Seoul that has that impact. And a little research led me to a fabulous mall called the IFC Center in Hong Kong. And today, when I mention it, even to Chinese students who I'm talking to, have you ever been to, oh my gosh, the IFC Center? I couldn't get in the mall. The director said, we sell Tom Ford, we sell Hermes, we sell Cartier. We don't want low-price things like your shoes. No, that's the way we were seen compared to them. And that went on for a couple of sales pitches, but I didn't give up because you ever think about it, there's always another way. In my touring of that area to see the retail stores, I noticed Zaha Hadid had buildings everywhere. She was like the superstar. Like Frank Gehry went to Bilbao, she went to Asia. She won the Pritzker Prize. She did the many buildings at the Japan Olympics. She also had done them at London. If I can hire Zaha, I thought, maybe that would give this man a reason to let me in the mall. So I did. She built the most fabulous store. It won Retail Store of the Year on Architectural Digest Europe. That's how good it was. And this guy walks into our store in Milan, gets the manager to call me, tracks me down on my cell phone. Hey, Weitzman? Yeah, I remember you. I was polite, although I didn't want to be. And he said, if you build me a store like I'm in Milan here, build it for me in the IFC Mall. I'll give you the best location there.
Oh, my God.
And he did. Now, he didn't care about the shoes. Zaha helped me get in that mall. And within 3 years, 25 malls in Asia had Stuart Weitzman stores.
Wow. I never heard that whole story. I remember because I was going to Milan and I went to visit that. You told me, go see that store. And the store is magnificent, but I didn't know that whole story around it.
The story occurred after you had seen that store, because it was up for about a year before he noticed it during Milan Fashion Week.
Interesting. Yeah, go see your story. You know, you do things around the way, do things in a creative way, you get a lot of attention. So now we said we were going to talk a little bit about this. So since you've retired, you sold your company to Coach. You're in your Act 2. So we only have a few minutes, but it was interesting to get to this point. But tell us from your Act 2, what you've done. You've come back to Wharton a lot. You've come back to Penn, and we appreciate it. And you've been inspiring our students. But you also have actually gone on the road, and you're giving talks at lots of universities. So what's that experience been like?
Well, it's been about 125. This year, a quarter of that. It's been fabulous, and it's been inspiring, and I'll tell you why. The students I meet are so excited about getting started in a career. They seem so wonderful, so nice. Their questions are great. It's like, my gosh, maybe in 20 years, this country will be what we always had thought it was and should be. These are the kids who are going to be running America, and they are phenomenal. And I will tell you, you would expect that, yes, at Stanford or at Wharton or at Princeton. But I've also been to RISD, and I feel the same thing. The last week I was at SMU, the same thing. So it isn't whether it's in the top 10, top 20, top 30. I am finding that everywhere, and it's a great hope. I am glad I'm doing this for that reason alone.
So you are unusual in that you had the design perspective and the business perspective. When you talk to these students, how common is that? Like, I imagine that that's not as common.
Generally, it's people who have one idea in mind. But I so emphasize, even in my talks at the Weitzman School of Design here, we're all salespeople. We all have to market. A great product unknown remains unknown. You have to know the business side. I give them ideas how to finance without having to sell their soul to so-called angel investors who often become devil investors, or to a bank that is looking over your shoulder every time you take a nickel out of your company. I try to teach them how to do it without that kind of unnecessary support. And they listen. And now, by the way, at the School of Design here at Penn, 30% of the students are taking courses in Wharton. And that's up from 25 and up from 20. And I believe, how can you open an office as an architect if you don't know how to run it, hire people, leadership qualities? You have to know all of that. You just can't follow a passion without reason.
And that kind of makes sense in that sense, because I don't know if this is true, since you know both, you'll know if it's true, but it seems like it's easier to teach designers business than to teach business people how to design.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. The most successful executives in my company were not business people from business schools who wear blinkers. It's creative people. They have the best imagination, and that makes them the best executive also. And we train them to become an executive within their role. And in the end, I think that helped make Stuart Weitzman an important company in our industry. Without that, we just would have been another shoe company.
Well, that is so great. We're out of time. I knew this was going to fly by, and so many more questions I had to ask you. But Stuart, thank you so much for joining us today. And we're going to take a short break. This is Marketing Matters Business Radio, SiriusXM 132.